I never thought I'd end up here. Latitude 68 degrees north, somewhere in the barren stretch between what used to be Tromsø and the Russian border, inside a weather station that stopped transmitting data 3 weeks before the world ended. My name is Dmitri Volkov, and I'm writing this because the silence up here makes you feel like you're already dead. If you don't remind yourself, you can still think, still form words, still exist as something more than just another warm body waiting to freeze or get torn apart. The station sits on stilts, 12 feet off the permafrost, a rectangular metal box painted that specific shade of institutional orange that screams, "Look at me. I'm important research happening out here." 4 support columns, each as thick as my torso, elevate the whole structure above the tundra. There's a metal staircase, 32 steps, I've counted them so many times I see them when I close my eyes, that leads up to the main entrance. The stairs have ice on them now, frozen solid, which actually works in my favor. Nothing can climb up quietly anymore. Every footstep, every scrape of frozen fingers on metal rings out like a dinner bell. The outbreak started in Oslo. At least, that's where the news report said it started before the news stopped being reports and became just screaming. I was working at the Institute of Marine Research in Bergen, studying deep-sea bacterial communities that thrive in toxic environments. Ironic, right? Spent 5 years analyzing organisms that shouldn't be able to survive, and now survival is the only thing that matters. When things started falling apart, and they fell apart fast, maybe 4 days from first infection to total collapse, I knew the cities were death traps. Everyone knew. But knowing and acting are different things. I had a colleague, Pavel Anderson, half Norwegian, half Russian, brilliant microbiologist, paranoid as hell. He'd been talking about end-of-world scenarios since I met him, always had go bags ready, always had plans. When the military cordoned Bergen and we heard the gunfire starting to outnumber the sirens, Pavel grabbed me by my coat and said, "I know a place, remote, supplied. We go now, or we die here." We took his truck, an old Hilux that ran on diesel and stubbornness. The highways were already jammed, cars abandoned, some still running, doors open, blood on the asphalt turning black in the cold air. We went north, avoiding the main routes, cutting through logging roads and reindeer migration paths. Pavel had maps, actual paper maps, with routes marked in red pen. He'd planned this. Maybe not a zombie apocalypse specifically, but he'd planned for collapse. "There's a research station," he told me as we drove through the night, headlights cutting through snow that had started falling heavy and thick. Atmospheric monitoring, run by the European Environment Agency, but it's automated mostly. 1 or 2 researchers rotate through, take readings, maintain equipment. Right now, off-season, should be empty. Has generators, fuel depot, supplies for months, isolated, defensible. We drove for 16 hours. Saw 3 other vehicles the entire time, all heading south, away from where we were going. Smart, probably. South meant warmer, meant potentially boat access to islands, meant more people and therefore more help. Except more people also meant more infected, and I'd already seen what happened when population density met an infection vector that spread through bites and turned people in minutes, not days. The landscape changed as we climbed north. Trees became sparse, stunted, then disappeared entirely. Just tundra, rolling and white and endless, under a sky that never got fully dark because we were far enough north that summer meant midnight sun and winter meant midday twilight. We were in between seasons, that strange period where day and night still existed but barely. The light had this quality, thin and gray, like looking through dirty glass. Pavel's hands were shaking on the wheel. Not from cold, the heater worked fine, but from exhaustion, from fear, from whatever he'd seen in Bergen before he found me. He wouldn't talk about it, just kept driving, checking the mirrors compulsively, flinching at every shadow on the roadside. We found the station 43 hours after leaving Bergen. 43 hours with maybe 6 hours of sleep total, pulled over on the side of logging roads with the engine running and one of us always watching. The station appeared suddenly, emerging from the snow and fog like something from a dream. This orange metal box on stilts in the middle of absolutely nothing. No trees for miles, no buildings, no cover, just flat white tundra stretching to the horizon in every direction, and this tiny outpost of human engineering standing alone against it. Pavel stopped the truck at the base of the stairs, killed the engine, and we both just sat there for a minute, listening to the cooling engine tick and the wind howl outside. The wind up here doesn't blow. It cuts, sharp and constant, carrying snow horizontally, stinging any exposed skin. "Looks abandoned," I said, stating the obvious because the silence needed breaking. "Good," Pavel replied. "Abandoned is safe. Abandoned means no one to get infected, means no one to fight for supplies. We get in, we secure it, we wait this out." We didn't wait it out. Pavel died 11 days later. Getting into the station was easy. Pavel had access codes from his EEA contacts, numbers that still worked because the automated systems didn't care about apocalypses. The door was heavy, industrial, with rubber seals to keep the Arctic air out. Inside was warmer, barely. The heating system ran on a thermostat set to just above freezing to conserve fuel, enough to keep the equipment from dying, but not enough for comfort. The main level was one large room, maybe 40 feet by 20, divided into functional areas. One corner had the OUTBREAK monitoring equipment, computers, screens showing atmospheric data that still updated because satellites apparently kept working even when civilization didn't. Sensors measuring CO2, methane, particulates, all the invisible things slowly killing the planet before the visible things started killing us. Another corner served as a kitchenette, compact but complete. Small electric stove, microwave, sink with a water heater, cabinets. There was a bathroom, tiny, with a chemical toilet and a shower stall. 2 bunk beds against one wall. Storage lockers, a desk with charts and maintenance logs. The last entry dated 3 weeks prior. All systems nominal, departing for Tromsø, back in spring. Below the main level, accessed by a hatch and ladder, was the generator room and fuel storage. The generator was a beast, a diesel unit rated for extreme cold, with enough fuel in the drums to run for months if we were careful. Solar panels on the roof supplemented power during the brief summer, but this time of year they were mostly decorative, covered in snow and ice. Above the main level, accessed by another ladder, was the observation deck. The roof, essentially, surrounded by a railing, crowded with antennas and sensors and anemometers spinning in the constant wind. You could see for miles up there, endless white in every direction, beautiful and terrible and completely empty. Pavel did an inventory that first day while I tried to get the heating system to produce actual warmth instead of theoretical life support. We had food, lots of it. The station stocked for long-term isolation, freeze-dried meals, canned goods, rice, pasta, powdered milk, protein bars, coffee, tea, sugar, salt, spices. Enough for 2 people to survive comfortably for 6 months, maybe 8 if we rationed. Water came from melting snow. There was a collection system on the roof that fed into storage tanks with filters and purification tablets for backup. Medical supplies were basic but adequate. First aid kit, antibiotics, painkillers, bandages, antiseptic. We had weapons, not guns. This was a research station, not a military outpost, but tools that could serve. An axe for breaking ice, a crowbar, knives, a flare gun with 12 flares. Not much against infected if they came in numbers, but enough to make a difference if we were smart. The first week was almost peaceful. We established routines. Pavel took morning watch, I took evening. We kept the lights off at night, used flashlights sparingly, conserved the generator by running it only 6 hours a day for cooking and charging batteries, and keeping the monitoring equipment alive, because Pavel was convinced someone, somewhere, was still watching those data streams and might send help if they saw the station was occupied. We didn't see anything out there. No infected, no survivors, no animals. Just snow and wind, and that endless, empty landscape. Pavel thought the cold was protecting us. That infected couldn't survive the temperatures, that they'd freeze solid before reaching us, even if they somehow knew we were here. He was wrong. Day 11. I was inside, heating water for coffee, when I heard Pavel shout from the observation deck. Not a scared shout, excited, almost happy. I grabbed the axe anyway and climbed the ladder, pushed open the hatch to the roof, and stepped into wind that immediately tried to freeze the moisture in my eyes. Pavel was at the railing, pointing south. "Look, smoke! Someone's alive out there!" I looked. He was right. Maybe 2 miles away, a thin column of gray smoke rising against the white landscape, barely visible but definitely there. Someone had made a fire. Someone was signaling or trying to stay warm or cooking food. Someone was alive. "We should check it out," Pavel said, and his voice had this edge of desperation I hadn't heard before. 11 days of isolation in a metal box with one other person will do that. Make you crave human contact, even when you know it's dangerous. "Bad idea," I told him. "Could be infected. Could be dangerous survivors. We're safe here. We have supplies. No reason to risk it. They might need help. They might have information. They might—" He stopped, looked at me, and I saw it in his eyes. Loneliness. The kind that aches. "We can't just hide up here forever, Dmitri." We argued for an hour. Eventually, we compromised. We'd watch the smoke. If it was still there tomorrow, if we saw signs of organization or signals, we'd consider making contact. But we wouldn't rush out. Wouldn't be stupid. The smoke was still there the next morning, and there were figures moving around it. 3 of them, dark shapes against the snow. Too far to make out details, but they moved purposefully, building something, tending the fire. Pavel wanted to go, wanted to take the truck, drive out there, make contact. I convinced him to wait, to observe another day. Something felt wrong. 3 people surviving out here, making a fire that visible, not trying to find shelter. It didn't add up. Day 13. The figures were still there, but now there were more. 7, maybe 8. And they weren't moving like survivors anymore. They were moving like infected. That distinctive jerky motion, purposeless wandering, interrupted by sudden bursts of activity. And the fire was bigger, spreading, consuming something I couldn't identify from this distance. "They're infected," I said, watching through binoculars we'd found in a storage locker. "All of them!" Pavel took the binoculars, looked, and his face went gray. "The cold doesn't stop them. We thought the cold should stop them." "They're moving slow," I observed. The figures stumbled through the snow, fell, got up, continued. "Frostbite, probably. Hypothermia." "But they're not stopping. They're not dying." "Can they smell us? From here?" Pavel's voice was shaking. "I don't know." We spent that day reinforcing. Pulled up the truck, parked it directly under the entrance, so the stairs were partially blocked, used zip ties and wire to secure the bottom of the staircase, creating a barrier that wouldn't stop a determined climber, but would slow them, make noise. Brought all the fuel drums up from below, stacked them inside the main room where we could defend them if needed. That night we heard them, not close, but out there in the dark, moaning, that sound infected, make that's almost human. But not quite, like a voice straining through damaged vocal cords. It carried on the wind, impossible to pinpoint direction or distance, just this ambient sound of wrongness invading our safe space. Pavel didn't sleep. I found him at dawn, sitting by the window with the axe across his lap, staring out at the tundra. The infected were closer. Not at the station, but visible now without binoculars. Maybe a mile away, 15 or 20 of them, clustered together, moving slowly north, moving toward us. "How do they know we're here?" Pavel whispered. "Maybe they don't. Maybe they're just wandering. Or maybe they followed our tracks from when we drove in 2 weeks ago, but the snow might have preserved them. Or maybe they can smell the generator exhaust, or see the heat signature of the building, or, Pavel, panicking doesn't help. He looked at me, and I barely recognized him. 11 days ago, he'd been solid, prepared, confident. Now he looked hollowed out, eyes too wide, skin too pale. We're trapped, Dmitri. We prepared for isolation, for survival. We didn't prepare for siege. The infected reached the station at midday on day 14. 23 of them by my count, shambling up to the base of the support columns, groaning and reaching upward, hands scraping against metal. They couldn't climb. The stairs were too complex, required too much coordination. They just clustered at the base, moaning, occasionally lunging at the supports, as if they could tear them down through enthusiasm. We watched from the windows, curtains mostly closed, peering through gaps. Some of the infected were fresh, recently turned, still wearing recognizable clothing. Thermal gear, research jackets, civilian winter wear. Others were older, clothes torn, skin blackened with frostbite, fingers missing, faces damaged by cold and time. "They're freezing," I said, pointing to one infected whose hand had literally snapped off at the wrist when it struck a support column. "The cold is damaging them. They're deteriorating." "Not fast enough," Pavel replied. He was right. Even damaged, even freezing, they didn't stop. They just continued, relentless, drawn by whatever infected sensed: heat, movement, sound, the simple presence of living humans. We turned off the generator to eliminate noise and exhaust. The station got cold fast. We bundled in sleeping bags, wore every layer we had, rationed warmth like it was food. The infected stayed for 3 days, just standing there, reaching, moaning. A few wandered off, then came back. 2 collapsed, didn't get up, bodies freezing solid in the snow, but the others just stepped over them and continued their vigil. On day 17, Pavel cracked. I was dozing, conserving energy, when I heard the door opening. I scrambled up, still tangled in my sleeping bag, and saw Pavel on the stairs, axe in hand, screaming at the infected below. Come on, you frozen bastards! Try it! Try to climb!" He was halfway down the stairs before I reached the door. The infected were responding, surging toward him, hands grasping. One managed to grab his boot. Pavel brought the axe down, severed frozen fingers, kicked free. "Pavel, get back inside!" He didn't listen, kept descending, kept swinging, and I realized he wasn't defending. He was attacking, was trying to clear them, to fight through them, to break the siege through violence. I don't know if he slipped or if they pulled him down. One moment he was on the stairs, axe swinging. The next he was on the ground, surrounded, and they were on him. He screamed, and it wasn't a fear scream or a pain scream. It was rage, pure and simple, the sound of someone who'd realized the world had ended and was furious about it. The axe was still in his hand when they bit into his throat. He killed 2 more before the blood loss took him. I watched from the doorway, useless, frozen not from cold, but from the simple understanding that going down there meant dying, and dying meant losing, and I wasn't ready to lose. Pavel stopped moving. The infected fed for a while. I won't describe that. Can't describe it without seeing it again. And then they waited. Stood around his body like mourners at a funeral, swaying, moaning, waiting for him to turn. It took 11 minutes. I timed it, needed something to focus on besides the horror. 11 minutes from death to reanimation. Pavel's body twitched, then convulsed, then sat up. The infected around him backed away slightly, as if recognizing a new member of the pack. Pavel stood, and he wasn't Pavel anymore. Just another infected, throat torn open, clothes soaked with blood that was already starting to freeze. They wandered off that night, all of them, including what used to be Pavel. Just walked away into the darkness like they'd lost interest or received some signal I couldn't detect. I watched them go, then sealed the door, pushed every heavy object in the station against it, and collapsed. I stayed in survival mode for the next week, barely ate, watched the horizons constantly, counted my remaining supplies with obsessive precision, The generator fuel would last 4 months at minimum usage. Food for 5 months, maybe 6 if I stretched it. Water was infinite as long as snow fell. I had time, I had shelter, I had a chance. But I was alone, completely, utterly alone in a metal box surrounded by frozen wasteland, and the silence was worse than the moaning infected had been. At least when they were there, I had purpose. Stay quiet, stay hidden, stay alive. Now, I just had existence, and existence without purpose is its own kind of death. I started talking to myself on day 25, not conversations, just narration. I'm heating water now. Need to check the fuel gauge. Pavel was right about the coffee. It's terrible, but it's warm. Anything to hear a human voice, even my own. Day 30. Saw movement on the southern horizon. Not infected, too coordinated. A vehicle, maybe. I watched through binoculars for 3 hours. It was a snowmobile, moving fast, heading northwest. A person driving it, definitely alive, bundled in cold weather gear. I considered signaling, waving, lighting a flare. Decided against it. Anyone surviving out here alone had their own problems, their own destination. Didn't need mine added to it. The snowmobile disappeared over the horizon. I felt oddly relieved. Day 38. The first supply problem emerged. Not food or fuel, but something more immediate. The water filtration system clogged. The snowmelt was contaminated, not with infection, but with particulates, maybe from increased volcanic activity or industrial fires burning unchecked since the collapse. The filters were designed for clean snow, not this gray sludge. I had backup purification tablets, but they wouldn't last forever. I spent 2 days jerry-rigging a pre-filter using coffee filters, cloth, and activated charcoal scraped from the ventilation system. It worked mostly. The water tasted like ash and chemicals, but it didn't make me sick. Day 41. Found a journal in Pavel's bunk. He'd been writing before he died, documenting our journey north, his thoughts on survival, his fears. The last entry was dated day 10, the day before we saw the smoke. Dmitri thinks I'm paranoid. Maybe I am. But paranoia kept me alive this long. The infected aren't the real danger. We've seen maybe 30 total, and the cold is killing them faster than they can spread. The real danger is people, desperate people, armed people, people who see our supplies and our shelter and decide they want it more than we do. That's what I'm afraid of, not zombies. Humanity. I closed the journal. Pavel had been wrong about some things, right about others. The infected were definitely a danger. His death proved that. But he had a point about people. Up here, isolated, I was safe from both. As long as I stayed hidden, stayed quiet, stayed disciplined. Day 47. I saw lights in the sky. Not stars. Lights, moving, pulsing, forming patterns. Aurora borealis, the northern lights, green and purple waves dancing across the heavens. I'd seen them before, of course, working in Bergen, occasional trips north for research. But this was different. This was a display of cosmic indifference, beauty continuing regardless of human suffering, nature completely unconcerned with our little apocalypse. I watched for hours from the observation deck, freezing despite my layers, until my fingers went numb and my face hurt from the cold. It was worth it. Worth it to remember that the world was bigger than infected and survival in this metal box on stilts. Day 52. The generator died, not out of fuel. I had fuel. A mechanical failure, something in the starter assembly. I wasn't an engineer. Pavel had been the technical one, had maintained the generator, knew its quirks. I tried for 3 days to fix it, using the station's maintenance manual, trial and error, increasing desperation. Nothing worked. Without the generator, I had no electric heat, no stove, no way to power the monitoring equipment. I had the propane camp stove from the emergency supplies, enough fuel for maybe 2 weeks of cooking. I had the chemical heat packs, good for warming hands, but not for heating a room. I had matches, lighters, fuel for fire, but burning anything inside the station risked carbon monoxide poisoning. I moved everything essential into one corner of the main room: sleeping bag, food supplies, water, medical kit, tools. Sealed off the rest with emergency blankets, creating a smaller space to heat with body warmth and chemical packs. It helped, barely. The temperature inside my little shelter stayed just above freezing. Everything else in the station dropped to outside ambient, somewhere around -20 Celsius, colder when the wind picked up. Day 60. I was starving. Not literally, I had food, plenty of food. But the cold burned calories faster than I could replace them. I was eating twice my normal intake and still losing weight, feeling my ribs through my layers, noticing how my gloves fit looser, how my face looked gaunt in the reflection of the darkened computer screens. The freeze-dried meals required hot water. With no generator, I had to use the camp stove for every meal, watching my propane supply dwindle. I started eating canned goods cold, forcing down gelatinous soup and congealed stew, anything to conserve fuel. It was miserable. Food is supposed to be warm, supposed to be one of the small comforts in a world that offers few. Cold food out of a can just reminded me how far I'd fallen. Day 68. I saw them again. Infected. A small group, maybe 6, wandering across the tundra a half-mile east. They weren't heading toward the station, just drifting, following whatever internal compass infected possessed. I watched them through binoculars. They were damaged, seriously damaged. 2 were missing limbs, one an arm, one a leg, dragging itself through the snow. Another had its jaw frozen shut, ice coating its face. They moved slowly, fell often, struggled to rise. The cold was winning. Slowly, maybe too slowly to matter, but winning nonetheless. Infected couldn't generate body heat efficiently, couldn't metabolize food for warmth, couldn't seek shelter. They just wandered until they froze, until their bodies became ice sculptures in the shapes of horror. I felt something watching them. Not pity. They were dead already. Just animated corpses. But something, like kinship. We were all struggling against the cold, all trying to continue when continuation seemed impossible. They would freeze eventually. I might freeze first. Day 73. My propane ran out. The camp stove sputtered and died while I was heating water for coffee. Real coffee, not the instant powder, because I'd decided I deserved one luxury if I was going to freeze to death in a metal box. I sat there watching the flame die, the pot of half-heated water steaming in the frigid air, and laughed. Actually laughed because the absurdity was too much. Survived the apocalypse, the infected, isolation, mechanical failures, and I was going to die because I couldn't heat water. I had options, not good options, but options. I could burn things for heat. The wooden bunks, the desk, the storage crates. Risk carbon monoxide, but maybe survive. I could try to fix the generator again, spend days or weeks teaching myself diesel mechanics through trial and error. I could leave, take whatever I could carry, walk to the coast, find a boat, escape to an island. Or I could stay, ration my remaining food, eat everything cold, wrap myself in every layer I owned, and hope rescue came before I froze. I chose to try fixing the generator again, not because I thought I'd succeed, but because I needed a project, something to do besides sit and wait for death. Day 79, I fixed it. 6 days of disassembling, cleaning, reassembling, reading manuals I barely understood, trying different combinations of parts and settings and prayers to whatever deity might care about isolated microbiologists in the Arctic. And it worked. The generator coughed, sputtered, and roared to life. And I actually cried. Tears freezing on my cheeks while I listened to that beautiful mechanical rumble, feeling the heat start to circulate again, watching the lights flicker on. I heated water, made coffee, cooked a proper meal, freeze-dried stroganoff that tasted like cardboard and chemicals and absolute heaven. Slept in actual warmth for the first time in a week, and my dreams were of summer, beaches, sunshine on skin that wasn't blue-white with cold. Day 82. The monitoring equipment started showing anomalies. Temperature readings fluctuating wildly, atmospheric pressure dropping, wind speeds increasing beyond anything the sensors had recorded before. At first I thought it was equipment failure, damaged by the cold. But the patterns were consistent across multiple instruments. A storm was coming, a big one. I spent 2 days preparing, secured everything on the observation deck that wasn't bolted down, antennas, sensors, anything the wind could tear off and send flying. Reinforced the door seals with weather stripping and duct tape. Brought in extra ice for water before visibility dropped. Checked the fuel, the food, the medical supplies. Made sure I could survive inside without going out for a week minimum. The storm hit on day 85. I'd been through Arctic storms before, but always in proper facilities, heated buildings with multiple rooms and other people for company. This was different. The wind hit the station like a physical thing, shaking the entire structure, making the support columns groan and the walls flex. Snow didn't fall. It flew horizontally, so thick I couldn't see the ground 12 feet below. The world became white noise, howling wind and driving snow and the metallic screaming of a building trying not to tear itself apart. I huddled in my corner, sleeping bag pulled up to my chin, listening to every sound and wondering if the next gust would be the one that toppled us over, sent the whole station tumbling across the tundra like a discarded can. The generator kept running. I couldn't turn it off, couldn't risk not being able to restart it, so I just let it burn fuel and make noise that was completely drowned out by the storm. The storm lasted 4 days. 4 days of constant wind, constant snow, constant fear that the building would fail. I ate mechanically, slept in fits, and mostly just existed, waiting for it to end or for the end to come. On day 89, I woke to silence. Not complete silence. The wind still blew, but at normal levels, not the freight train roar of the storm. I stumbled to the window, wiped away condensation, and looked out at a transformed landscape. The snow had drifted, creating sculpted waves and valleys, completely burying the truck I'd left at the base of the stairs. The stairs themselves were half buried, packed solid with snow and ice. And there were bodies, frozen, infected, scattered across the tundra in a rough circle around the station. 15, maybe 20. The storm had buried some, partially, just limbs or heads showing above the snow. Others were fully visible, frozen in positions of movement, reaching toward the station even in death. They'd been there during the storm, drawn by the generator noise maybe, or heat, or just random wandering. They'd surrounded the station while I was inside, and the storm had killed them, frozen them solid before they could do anything. If the storm had come a day later, if they'd arrived a day earlier, they might have found a way in before the cold took them. I went outside for the first time in weeks, had to dig out the door, then chip ice off the stairs, descend carefully because everything was slick and dangerous. The cold hit me immediately, even through my layers, -30 at least, not counting wind chill. My breath froze in my beard, my eyes watered and the tears crystallized. I walked among the frozen infected, examining them. They were like statues, ice sculptures depicting horror. Some still had expressions, rage, hunger, confusion, frozen on ruined faces. Others were too damaged to read. All of them were dead, finally. Permanently dead. The cold had succeeded where everything else had failed. I found Pavel among them, recognized him by his jacket, his build, the axe still, clutched in one frozen hand. He'd come back, maybe drawn by memory, maybe by chance, but he'd come back to the station and the storm had stopped him 30 feet from the stairs. I tried to bury him, couldn't. The ground was frozen solid and I didn't have tools for digging permafrost. So I gathered snow instead, piled it over his body, created a cairn marking where Pavel Anderson died twice, once to infection and once to cold. It wasn't much, but it was something, more than most people were getting. Day 95. The frozen infected started to move again. Not all of them. Some were too damaged, frozen too solid, but a few, the fresher ones, the ones the cold hadn't completely destroyed, they thawed during the day when the sun was up, and they moved, slow, damaged, barely functional but moving. One crawled across the snow using its arms, legs trailing uselessly behind. Another stood but couldn't walk, just swayed in place, arms reaching. I watched from the observation deck, binoculars in hand, documenting this new horror. The infection didn't die from freezing. It just paused. Given enough warmth, even minimal warmth from the sun on snow, they came back. Not alive, they'd never be alive again, but mobile, dangerous, persistent. The realization was crushing. I'd thought the cold was protection, that winter would kill the infected faster than they could spread, that I just had to wait for spring and the world would be clean again. But if freezing only paused them, if thawing brought them back, then the infected were permanent. Every frozen body out there was a time bomb waiting for warmer weather. Day 102. I had a visitor. Not infected, human, alive. I saw the snowmobile first, approaching from the northwest, moving fast. I grabbed the binoculars, watched as it got closer, and saw the driver, bundled in winter gear, face covered, rifle strapped across their back. They stopped about 100 yards from the station, killed the engine, and just sat there, looking up at the building. I didn't know what to do. Wave, hide, shoot a flare? Every scenario I imagined ended badly. Best case? They wanted to trade, maybe share information, and would leave peacefully. Worst case? They wanted the station, the supplies, and had the weapons to take it. The driver dismounted, approached slowly, hands visible and empty. Stopped at the base of the stairs, tilted their head back, and shouted up, "Anyone alive in there?" A woman's voice, young, maybe 30s, Norwegian accent, heavy. I hesitated, then stepped out onto the observation deck where she could see me. "I'm alive!" I shouted back, wind carrying my words away, but apparently not too far because she nodded. "I'm Ingrid, not infected, not here to hurt you. Just passing through, saw the station, wanted to check for survivors." "There's only me. What do you want?" "Information. Trade, maybe. You have power, I can see the lights, haven't seen working electricity in months." And we negotiated for 20 minutes, shouting over the wind. She wanted to come up just to warm up, maybe charge some batteries. I wanted to know she was alone, unarmed except for the rifle which she'd leave at the bottom of the stairs. We compromised. She could come up, keep the rifle, but I'd keep the door locked and we'd talk through it first. She climbed the stairs slowly, obviously exhausted. Up close, through the window in the door, I could see her face, weathered, scarred, eyes that had seen things. She looked like a survivor. Looked like I probably looked. I opened the door. Ingrid stepped inside, and for the first time in 89 days, I wasn't alone. She didn't stay long. Maybe 2 hours. Enough to warm up, charge her equipment, share some information. She'd come from a settlement on the coast, 40 people living in a repurposed fishing facility, surviving on caught fish and salvaged supplies. They'd made it work through discipline and ruthlessness. Anyone bitten was expelled immediately. No exceptions, no mercy. "We've seen maybe 200 infected total," Ingrid told me, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee I'd made. "Most freeze solid by October. Come spring, they thaw, but they're damaged, missing pieces, slow. Easy to avoid if you're careful. The real problem is other survivors, groups that didn't prepare, didn't plan. They're getting desperate, raiding, killing for supplies." "You're alone," I observed. "That seems risky." "Safer than traveling with others. Snowmobile only carries one comfortably. I'm scouting, mapping safe routes, looking for supply caches. The settlement needs to know what's out there before we make any moves." She looked around the station, taking in the equipment, the supplies, the obvious signs of long-term habitation. "You planning to stay here?" "Don't have anywhere else to go." "That's fair. But winter won't last forever. When spring comes, the infected will move more. The tundra will thaw. Travel will get easier. That means more people coming through, more infected wandering. You'll be visible for miles, elevated like this." "I know. I'm trying not to think about it." Ingrid smiled, tired but genuine. "Survivors think about nothing else. Future planning is what separates the living from the dead." She left before dark, taking my offer of some spare fuel and food in exchange for the information and the simple human contact. As I watched her snowmobile disappear into the twilight, I felt the isolation settle back like a physical weight. 2 hours of conversation, and my voice was already hoarse from disuse. How long could I do this? How long before I went completely mad from loneliness? Day 108. I started seeing things, movement in the corners of my vision that wasn't there when I looked directly, shadows crossing the snow that had no source. I heard voices in the wind, Pavel's voice, Ingrid's, conversations that never happened. I knew it was isolation. My brain, manufacturing stimulation because it wasn't getting any, didn't make it less disturbing. I started projects to stay grounded, reorganized the food supplies by expiration date, created a water collection system that was more efficient, wasting less snow. Began a journal documenting everything: daily weather, supply levels, observations of the tundra, my thoughts. Writing helped, made me feel human, like my experiences mattered, like someone might read this someday and understand what it was like. Day 115. The infected returned. Not the frozen ones. Those were still scattered around the station, slowly being buried by snow, new ones wandering in from the east, following some path only they could sense. 12 of them, moving in a loose group, shambling through the snow with that distinctive gait. They found the station. Of course they did. It's a giant orange box on stilts, impossible to miss. They gathered at the base, reaching upward, moaning. The sound was almost comforting by now, familiar. At least they were company, even terrible company. I watched them from above, counting, analyzing. 3 were fresh, recently turned, still wearing intact clothing and showing minimal frostbite. The others were older, damaged, missing fingers or toes or noses, skin blackened and cracked. They didn't coordinate, didn't communicate, just existed in proximity, united by hunger and the simple directive to find food. One of them was a child, maybe 10 years old, wearing a school jacket, half its face frozen solid. I had to look away from that one, had to remind myself it wasn't a child anymore, just a thing wearing a child's body. Didn't help much. Day 119. I made a mistake. A stupid, nearly fatal mistake. I was refilling the generator, distracted by the infected moaning below, not paying attention. Spilled diesel on my glove, didn't notice until I was back inside and the fumes hit me. Took off the glove, saw my hand was soaked, and realized I'd created a problem. Diesel at these temperatures isn't immediately dangerous, but is still a solvent. It was already leaching oils from my skin, starting to cause irritation. I washed thoroughly, but some had soaked through to my underlayer. Over the next few hours, my hand developed a rash, then blisters, chemical burn, mild but painful. I treated it with the medical supplies, antibiotic ointment, bandages, painkillers. It would heal, probably without infection, but it was a reminder of how fragile everything was. One mistake, one moment of inattention, and I could lose a hand to infection or frostbite. Out here alone, that was a death sentence. Day 126, the child infected figured out the stairs. I don't know how. Maybe it retained more cognition than the others. Maybe it got lucky. But I watched it climb, slowly, one step at a time, hands gripping the railing, pulling itself up. It made it 6 steps before losing balance and falling back to the snow. Tried again. Fell again. Kept trying. The persistence was terrifying. It wasn't giving up, wasn't getting distracted, just kept attempting to reach me over and over, failing and trying again with mechanical determination. I watched for 3 hours, hypnotized by the horror, until finally it got wedged between the stairs and a support column, trapped by its own frozen limbs, and stopped moving. That night I dreamed about it. Dreamed it made it to the top, got through the door, came for me in my sleep. Woke up screaming, tangled in my sleeping bag, certain I could hear small footsteps on metal. Day 133. My birthday. Turned 36 today, alone in a research station surrounded by infected, celebrating with freeze-dried beef stroganoff and instant coffee. Happy birthday, Dmitri. You've survived 4 months of apocalypse. Your prize is more apocalypse. I allowed myself one luxury. A full hour of heat, generator running on high, the station actually warm instead of just survivable. Stripped down to a single layer, felt what warm air on skin was like. It was glorious. Used up a day's worth of fuel for that hour, and it was worth every drop. Day 140. Saw something strange on the monitoring equipment. The computers still ran, still collected data, even though no one was receiving it anymore. Atmospheric readings showed a spike in particulates, specifically sulfur dioxide and ash. Volcanic activity somewhere, or massive fires, or both. The sky had been hazy for weeks, the sun appearing as a dim disk through perpetual smog. I wondered what the world looked like now, beyond my limited horizon. Were cities still burning? Had governments reformed? Were there safe zones, military installations, walled communities? Or was it all just survivors in isolated pockets, hanging on by fingernails and stubbornness? No way to know. The radio only picked up static. No broadcasts, no emergency signals, nothing but the eternal hiss of dead air. Day 147. The infected left, just wandered away during the night, following whatever impulse or instinct drove them. I woke to silence, real silence, without the background moaning, and looked out to see empty tundra. They were gone, all except the frozen ones, and the child still wedged in the stairs. I felt relieved and abandoned simultaneously. They'd been terrible company, but they'd been company. Now it was just me and the wind again. Day 152. Food inventory showed a problem. I'd been too generous with portions, not rationing strictly enough. At current consumption, I had maybe 2 months of food left. After that, starvation, or I had to find alternatives. Alternatives meant hunting. The tundra supported life. Ptarmigan, Arctic hares, maybe fox or even reindeer if I was lucky. But hunting meant going outside, ranging far from the station, exposing myself to cold and infected, and the simple risk of getting lost in a white landscape with no landmarks. I had the flare gun, but only 12 flares. Useless for hunting. No bow, no snares, no fishing gear. I'd have to improvise everything. Day 159. I built a snare from wire scavenged from the monitoring equipment. Wasn't sure what I was doing. Just followed half-remembered descriptions from survival shows I'd watched before the world ended. Set it near some rocks about a quarter mile from the station, in a spot that looked like animals might pass through based on tracks in the snow. Checked it for 5 days. Nothing. The snare sat there, empty, mocking me. Day 164. Found a ptarmigan frozen solid near the snare. Not caught in the snare, just dead, frozen, like it had landed and couldn't take off again. Gift from the universe or random chance, didn't matter. I had meat, carried it back to the station, thawed it carefully, cooked it thoroughly. The taste was incredible. Real meat, not freeze-dried, not canned. I ate slowly, savoring each bite, and saved half for the next day because rationing mattered even for unexpected windfalls. Day 170. The generator started making a noise, not loud, but wrong, a clicking sound in the rhythm that shouldn't be there. I spent hours trying to diagnose it, checking components, tightening bolts, cleaning filters. The noise persisted. Was terrified it would fail again. Last time, I'd gotten lucky with the repair. Next time, I might not. And without the generator, without heat, I'd last maybe a week in these temperatures. Day 176. Ingrid came back, saw her snowmobile approaching from the same direction, recognized the way she drove. Fast, but controlled, confident. She stopped at the usual spot, looked up, and waved. I let her in immediately this time, no negotiation needed. She was carrying supplies, food, fuel, batteries, and she looked worse than last time. New scars on her face, one eye swollen shut, hand bandaged. "What happened?" I asked, offering coffee before she even sat down. "Raiders hit our settlement 3 weeks ago. 20 armed survivors from the south wanted our supplies and our location. We fought them off, but it cost us. 7 dead, including our leader. We're regrouping, trying to decide if we stay or abandon the coast." "I'm sorry." Ingrid shrugged, wincing at the motion. "It's the world now. Kill or be killed. Share or starve. We chose to fight. Might have chosen wrong." She stayed longer this time. 2 days, recovering from her injuries in the journey. We talked more, shared stories of life before, compared survival strategies. She was fascinated by the monitoring equipment, the data still being collected. "Someone might be watching," she said, looking at the screens showing atmospheric readings. "Satellites still work. Someone, somewhere, might be seeing this and knowing you're alive. Or it's all automatic, machines talking to machines with no one listening. Maybe, but machines mean infrastructure. Infrastructure means survivors with resources. That's hope, Dmitri. That's what keeps you going." When she left, she gave me something. A 2-way radio, long range, solar charged. "Channel 7, she told me. "We broadcast every morning at 9, just checking in, sharing information. You don't have to respond, but you can listen. No, you're not completely alone." Day 182. I listened to the radio for the first time. 9 a.m., Channel 7, and Ingrid's voice crackled through. "Morning check, settlement holding steady, 15 survivors, supplies adequate for 2 months, no infected sightings this week, no raiders. If anyone's listening, we're here. We're alive. Don't give up." Simple words, but they hit hard. I wasn't the only one surviving, wasn't the only one fighting to see another day. There were pockets of humanity out there, hanging on, refusing to die quietly. I didn't respond, wasn't ready to commit to that level of contact, but I listened, and that was something. Day 190. The weather turned, temperatures dropped further, -40 regularly, -50 with wind chill. The station groaned constantly, metal contracting, ice forming on every surface inside despite the generator's best efforts. I wore every layer I owned, slept in the sleeping bag fully dressed, and still shivered constantly. This was survival at its most basic. Maintain warmth, maintain food, maintain sanity. Everything else was luxury. Day 197. Saw a polar bear, massive, walking across the tundra like it owned the world, which I suppose it did now. It approached the station, sniffed at the frozen infected still scattered around, and moved on. Didn't even glance up at me watching from the observation deck. Apex predator, completely unbothered by the apocalypse. Probably thriving now, with human competition removed. The thought was oddly comforting. Life continued, just not human life. The planet would be fine without us. Day 203. The clicking in the generator got worse. Now it was accompanied by vibration, the whole unit shaking slightly with each cycle. I shut it down, let it cool completely, and performed the most thorough inspection I could manage with my limited knowledge. Found the problem. A crack in one of the mounting brackets, small but growing, causing misalignment. I couldn't weld it, no equipment, no skills, but I could reinforce it with wire and hope it held. It held. For now. Day 210. 7 months since the outbreak. 7 months since the world ended, and I ran north with Pavel. He'd been dead for 6 months now, buried under snow that had compacted into ice. Sometimes I still heard his voice, imagined what he'd say about my situation, my choices, my chances. "You're still alive, Dmitri. That's what matters. Don't overthink it. Just survive one more day." Good advice, even if it was just my imagination. Day 216, found. Another ptarmigan, this one alive, injured, wing broken. It had landed near the station and couldn't take off. I caught it easily, ended it quickly, and processed it for food. 2 meals from one bird, if I was careful. While cleaning it, I noticed something. Parasites, small, white, moving in the muscle tissue. I'd seen similar in fish samples before the world ended, normal for wild game, killed by thorough cooking. But it reminded me that nature was still dangerous in all the old ways, even with new horrors added. Cooked the meat extra thoroughly, ate it anyway. Protein was protein. Day 223, Ingrid's morning broadcast changed. Different voice, male, older. "This is Henrik. Ingrid is on patrol. Settlement status unchanged. We're looking for a new location, planning to move before spring. Too exposed at the coast. If anyone has information about safe zones or settlements inland, we're listening on this channel." I wondered where Ingrid was, hoped she was safe. Wondered if I should respond, offer the station as a waypoint or refuge. Decided against it. The station kept me alive because it was isolated, hidden by distance and weather. Advertise its location, and it becomes a target. Selfish reasoning, maybe, but survival often is. Day 230. The infected came back, not wandering, hunting. I don't know how else to describe it. They approached from multiple directions simultaneously, converging on the station with purpose. 15 of them, moving in coordination I'd never seen before. I watched from above, trying to understand. Infected didn't coordinate, didn't plan. They just followed stimulus, sound, movement, heat, scent. But these were moving like a pack, like predators who'd identified prey. They surrounded the station, testing the supports, climbing attempts becoming more organized. One would try the stairs, fail, fall back. Another would try a different angle. They were learning, or something in them was learning. I made noise, banged on the walls, trying to draw them to one side so I could observe their response. They didn't react normally. Didn't surge toward the sound in a mob. Half moved toward it, half maintained position around the perimeter. Flanking behavior, strategic thinking, that terrified me more than anything I'd seen. If infected were evolving intelligence, coordination, strategy, then nowhere was safe. The whole premise of survival, that infected were stupid, predictable, exploitable, would collapse. They stayed for 2 days this time, constantly testing, probing, searching for weakness. I stayed inside, motionless, silent, hoping they'd lose interest. On the 3rd morning, they left, all at once, moving south as a group. I checked the radio immediately. "Ingrid, Henrik, anyone listening, the infected are changing. Saw coordinated behavior, group hunting tactics. They're getting smarter. Be careful." I transmitted before I could second-guess myself. First time I'd spoken on the radio, broken my isolation by choice. Felt like crossing a threshold. Henrik's voice came back an hour later. "Message received. We've seen similar behavior near the coast. Theory is the oldest infected, the ones that survived longest, are retaining more cognition. Not intelligence, but pattern recognition. Muscle memory. They're adapting." Adapting. The word felt like a death sentence. Humanity's advantage was intelligence, tools, planning. If infected adapted, closed that gap even slightly, the balance shifted toward extinction. Day 237. I caught movement on the horizon, something different from infected or wildlife. Used the binoculars, saw a line of people, actual people, alive, walking. A caravan, maybe 20 individuals, pulling sleds loaded with supplies. They were moving northwest, away from the station, but close enough to see if they looked in the right direction. I watched them for hours, tracking their progress until they disappeared beyond the horizon. A group that size, that organized with supplies, they were heading somewhere specific. A settlement, a safe zone, somewhere they believed offered better chances than wherever they'd come from. Part of me wanted to run after them, join them, rejoin human society. Part of me remembered Pavel's warning about desperate people, about the danger humanity posed to itself. I stayed hidden. Day 244. The generator failed. Not the temporary failure I'd fixed before, complete, catastrophic failure. Something in the engine seized, a sound like metal tearing, then silence. Smoke rose from the housing. When I opened the panel, I saw why. The reinforced bracket had failed anyway. The misalignment had stressed the engine beyond tolerance, and something internal had broken in a way I couldn't see, couldn't access, couldn't fix. I sat there for an hour, just staring at the silent generator, understanding what this meant. No heat, no cooked food, no light except what little came through the windows during the brief daylight hours. The station would become a freezer, and I'd become part of its contents unless I made changes immediately. I moved everything essential to the smallest room, the bathroom, sealed it with every insulating material I could find, sleeping bags, emergency blankets, spare clothing, anything that would hold heat. Moved the camp stove in, rationed the remaining propane, created a cocoon barely large enough to sit up in, that I could heat with body warmth and occasional propane bursts. It worked, barely. Temperature inside my cocoon stayed just above freezing. Everything outside it dropped to outside ambient temperatures, currently -45. Day 251, I was running out of food, down to the last of the freeze-dried meals, a few cans, some rice and pasta that I couldn't cook without wasting precious propane. I'd been eating half rations for weeks, conserving, stretching supplies that were never meant to last this long alone. Math was simple. 10 days of food left at current consumption. After that, hunting or starvation. And hunting in these temperatures without shelter to return to that wasn't actively trying to kill me. Seemed suicidal. I considered my options. Could eat the food I couldn't cook. Raw rice wouldn't kill me, just be unpleasant and difficult to digest. Could try setting more snares, hoping for another lucky frozen bird. Could attempt to reach the coast, find Ingrid's settlement, trade labor for food. Could transmit on the radio, ask for help, expose myself to whatever response that brought. Or could give up, stop fighting, let the cold take me. Peaceful way to go, supposedly. Just fall asleep and don't wake up. I wasn't ready for that option yet. Day 257. I left the station. First time in over 2 months, stepping out into wind that cut through every layer, into cold that made breathing painful. Descended the stairs carefully. They were treacherous with ice, and a fall meant death. Reached the ground, and just stood there for a moment, adjusting to being outside, to having space around me. The frozen infected were still there, scattered like discarded mannequins. I avoided looking at them, focused on the task. Check my snares, look for any food source, scout the immediate area for anything useful. Found nothing. The tundra was empty, lifeless, nothing but snow and wind and the distant horizon. My snares had been buried by snow, torn apart by wind, rendered useless. I reset what I could with numb fingers, knowing it was probably futile. Started back to the station and heard it. An engine. Distant but growing closer. I looked around frantically, saw nothing, then spotted it. A helicopter, military, flying low and fast, heading northeast. I waved, screamed, ran into open ground where they could see me, jumping, flailing, making myself as visible as possible. The helicopter continued, didn't slow, didn't deviate. Either didn't see me or chose not to stop. I watched it disappear, felt hope disappear with it. Someone was still flying, still operating machinery, still organized enough for aerial patrols or transport. But they weren't stopping for lone survivors, flagging them down from the tundra. Day 263, down to 3 days of food. I was eating once a day now, small portions, forcing it down even though hunger had become a constant companion. My body was consuming itself, burning muscle for energy, shutting down non-essential functions. I was cold all the time, even in my cocoon, tired constantly. Thinking became difficult, thoughts sluggish and circular. Starvation is slow. That's the cruel part. Fast enough to be inevitable once it starts, slow enough to be agonizing every step of the way. I transmitted on the radio again, voice weak but clear. "This is Dmitri Volkov, Atmospheric Research Station, 68 degrees north, requesting assistance. Critical food. Shortage. Will provide coordinates to anyone who can help." No response, not that day, not the next. Just silence and static and the slow approach of death. Day 265. Ingrid's voice on the radio, crackling through interference. "Dmitri, this is Ingrid. Received your transmission. We're mobilizing a supply run. Give me 3 days to reach you. Hold on. Don't give up." 3 days. I had food for maybe 2 if I stretched it impossibly thin. But I had propane for heat, I had water, I had shelter. 3 days was possible. "Maybe," I responded. "I'll be here, thank you." 2 words never felt more significant. Day 266. Ate my last freeze-dried meal. Savored it, forcing each bite to register, to be remembered. Tomorrow I'd start on the raw rice, small amounts soaked in water to soften it. Day after that, whatever I could find, or nothing at all. The night was brutally cold. Even in my cocoon, even with every layer, I shivered violently, teeth chattering, body trying to generate warmth it didn't have energy to produce. Fell into half-sleep, awareness drifting, dreaming of warmth and food and life before. Day 267. Ate a handful of rice soaked overnight. It was like eating gravel, hard and tasteless, and nearly impossible to swallow. Choked it down, drank water, felt it sit heavy and wrong in my stomach. Did it again at midday, forcing nutrition into a body that was shutting down. Heard engines in the afternoon, multiple engines, distant but approaching. Scrambled out of my cocoon, out of the bathroom, through the frigid main room to the windows. Saw them. Snowmobiles, 3 of them, crossing the tundra from the northwest. Ingrid had come. She'd actually come. I descended the stairs, nearly falling twice, reached the ground as the snowmobiles arrived. Ingrid dismounted, 2 others with her. Henrik, the voice from the radio, older man with a thick beard, and a young woman whose name I didn't catch. They had supplies, food, fuel, batteries, medical supplies. "You look terrible," Ingrid said, which made me laugh because I knew it was true. I'd lost maybe 30 pounds, face gaunt, eyes hollow, fingers trembling from weakness. "I look alive," I replied. "That's what matters." They stayed for 6 hours, long enough to help me move supplies inside, check the station, assess damage, and talk through options. The generator was beyond repair without parts they didn't have. But they gave me enough propane to last 2 months, enough food for 3, a solar charger for batteries, and the radio. "You can't stay here forever," Henrik said, direct and blunt. "Winter's ending. Spring means thaw, means travel becomes possible again, means more infected mobile, means raiders and desperate survivors. This place is a beacon. You'll be found." What's my alternative? Come with us, back to the settlement. We're moving inland, finding a more defensible location. Could use someone with your skills, your knowledge. I considered it. Rejoining society, having human contact, sharing resources and risks. It sounded good. It also sounded like trading one set of problems for another, adding interpersonal conflict and group dynamics to the already impossible task of survival. "Let me think about it," I said. "Check back in a month, I'll have an answer." Ingrid nodded, understanding. "Month might be too late, but I'll try. Channel 7, 9 a.m. Stay in touch." They left before dark, disappearing into the twilight on their snowmobiles, and I was alone again. But different this time. Alone with hope, with supplies, with options. Day 274. I spent a week recovering, eating properly, regaining strength. The food Ingrid brought was simple but nutritious. Dried fish, cured meat, grains, vegetables in brine. I rationed it carefully, knowing it had to last, but allowed myself proper portions, rebuilding the body I'd nearly destroyed. The station was livable again with the propane, Not comfortable, but survivable. I could heat water, cook food, warm my sleeping space to tolerable levels. The difference was staggering. Hunger and cold together are exponentially worse than either alone. Day 281. Spring was coming. I could feel it in the air, see it in subtle changes. The sun rose higher, stayed up longer. The wind, while still brutal, occasionally carried hints of warmth. Snow started melting during the day, refreezing at night, creating ice layers that caught sunlight and reflected it in dazzling displays. And the infected were moving more. I saw groups regularly now, wandering across the thawing tundra, moving with purpose or without, hard to tell from distance. They were damaged, many missing limbs or frozen solid in parts, but mobile enough to be dangerous. Day 288. Made a decision. I couldn't stay at the station. Henrik was right. Spring meant exposure, meant danger from every direction. I needed to join Ingrid's group or find another solution or accept that I was choosing death by isolation. I started preparing for departure, organized supplies into what I could carry versus what I'd have to leave. Tested the solar charger, made sure the radio worked, memorized the channel and broadcast schedule. Created a pack that was heavy but manageable, filled with essentials: food, water purification, medical supplies, tools, fire-starting equipment, the radio. Day 295. Transmitted to Ingrid. I'm ready to leave. When you come next, I'm coming with you. Her response came immediately, like she'd been waiting. Understood. We're moving the settlement in 2 weeks. I'll come through, pick you up. Be ready to travel light and fast. And Dmitri, good choice. You wouldn't have lasted another month alone. She was probably right. Day 302. While preparing, I explored parts of the station I'd ignored during survival mode. Found a storage locker I'd missed, tucked under the stairs to the observation deck, containing equipment for ice core sampling. Drills, collection tubes, analysis tools. Also found personal items left by previous researchers, photos, letters, a journal. Read the journal. It belonged to someone named Astrid Berg, dated 3 years ago, documenting a summer research season studying atmospheric changes. Her entries were mundane, scientific, occasionally personal. The last entry, heading back to civilization tomorrow. 6 months up here changes you. The isolation, the landscape, the sheer emptiness. It strips away everything superficial, leaves only what's essential. I'll miss it strangely. Miss the silence. Miss knowing exactly what each day requires. Survive, observe, document. Simple. Pure. The world below is complicated. Up here, everything is clear. I understood exactly what she meant. Day 309. Saw something impossible. I was on the observation deck, watching the horizon, when I spotted movement. A herd. Reindeer, maybe 30 of them, moving across the tundra heading north. They looked healthy, moving with purpose, migrating toward summer feeding grounds that they somehow knew still existed despite the apocalypse. Life continuing. Animals following patterns older than human civilization, unbothered by our collapse. It was beautiful and humbling and strangely hopeful. Day 314. Ingrid arrived on schedule, snowmobile loaded with supplies, wearing new gear, better insulation, tactical vest, weapons I hadn't seen before. She looked harder, more weathered, like the past month had aged her years. "Ready?" she asked, and I nodded, shouldering my pack. We sealed the station as best we could, locked the doors, shut down systems I'd kept running. I took one last look around, this metal box that had kept me alive through the worst winter of my life. Then followed Ingrid down the stairs. The snowmobile had a passenger seat, cramped but functional. I climbed on behind her, pack secured, and she gunned the engine. We took off across the tundra, the station shrinking behind us until it was just an orange dot, then nothing at all. "Where are we going?" I shouted over the engine noise. "Inland, abandoned mining facility in the mountains. Defensible, has infrastructure, far from population centers." Henrik found it 2 weeks ago. We're moving everyone there. How many survivors? 12 now. Was 15, but we lost 3 to raiders last week. That's why we're moving. The journey took 6 hours, crossing terrain that would have been impassable a month ago, but was now navigable as the thaw continued. We saw infected occasionally, lone wanderers or small groups moving slowly through slush and mud. Ingrid avoided them, steering wide, not taking chances. We saw other things too. Abandoned vehicles, collapsed structures, bodies frozen in snow. Evidence of failed escape attempts, people who'd tried to run and hadn't made it. Each one a story that ended badly. The mining facility appeared suddenly, nestled in a valley between mountains, partially hidden by terrain and distance. It was massive. Multiple buildings, industrial equipment, storage tanks, all built to last in this harsh environment. And it was occupied. I saw people moving between buildings, smoke from fires, signs of organization and life. Ingrid pulled up to what looked like a main gate, where 2 armed guards, Henrik and someone I didn't know, greeted us. They checked me over, professional but not hostile, then let us through. "Welcome to New Bergen," Henrik said with a slight smile. "Population 12, 13 now with you." I looked around, taking in the facility, the people, the infrastructure. It was crude, cobbled together from salvage and determination, but it was civilization, community, survival through cooperation. "Thank you," I said to Ingrid, and meant it. "You saved my life," she shrugged. "You'd have done the same. That's what we do now. Save each other. Because if we don't, there's no one else who will." We walked into the facility together, and for the first time in 10 months, I felt like maybe humanity had a chance. The mining facility was larger than it had seemed from outside. The main complex consisted of 6 buildings connected by covered walkways, smart design for Arctic conditions where travel between structures could be lethal during storms. The walkways were enclosed but unheated, metal tunnels that kept wind out but not cold. Still better than open exposure. Henrik gave me the tour while Ingrid went to report to whoever passed for leadership. The largest building served as communal space. Cooking area, eating hall, meeting room, all combined in one high-ceilinged area that echoed with every sound. Heat came from a combination of wood stoves and salvaged heating units running on propane. Not efficient, but functional. Sleeping quarters were in 2 separate buildings, segregated by gender for privacy and peace. Each person had a bunk, a footlocker, a space to call their own. Simple, but compared to my cocoon in the research station bathroom, it was luxury. Storage buildings held food and supplies, organized with military precision. Henrik showed me the inventory system, everything cataloged, rationed, tracked. "We learned hard lessons early on," he explained. "Hoarding causes conflict. Theft causes violence. Transparency keeps everyone honest." The facility also had workshops where people repaired equipment, built tools, worked on projects to improve their situation. I saw a woman modifying snowmobile engines, another crafting snares and traps, a young man reloading ammunition using salvaged components. "Everyone contributes," Henrik said. "Your skills, your knowledge, you'll find a place. We need scientists, need people who can think beyond tomorrow." He introduced me to the others over the next few days. Names and faces blurred together initially, but gradually they resolved into individuals. Sophie, the engineer, keeping machines running through improvisation and stubbornness. She'd worked offshore oil rigs before the collapse, was used to isolated, dangerous work. Anders, former military, handled security and training. He was teaching everyone to fight, to shoot, to defend themselves and the settlement. Kari, a doctor, well, a veterinarian, but medical knowledge was medical knowledge. She'd saved 3 people from infected bites through immediate amputation. Brutal but effective. Others whose roles were less defined but equally essential: scouts, hunters, builders, teachers for the 2 children in the group. Siblings, orphaned during the outbreak, adopted by the community. I found my place quickly. The facility had a small laboratory, dusty and neglected, but equipped for mineral analysis. I converted it to a different purpose, studying the infection. We had samples, tissue from infected that had been neutralized, blood from survivors, environmental samples from areas with high infection rates. Understanding the disease became my obsession. Not to cure it, that was beyond our resources and my expertise, but to understand transmission, survival rates, environmental factors, information that could keep people alive. Week 2 at New Bergen, I discovered the infected couldn't survive in water. Not cold water, not for long. Something about the infection required air, required specific conditions. Bodies submerged for more than a few hours stopped moving, stopped reanimating. The implications were significant. Settlements near water had natural barriers, natural defenses. Week 3 confirmed that the infection was definitely mutating. Samples from recent infected showed genetic variations not present in earlier samples. The disease was adapting, becoming better at spreading, better at reanimating hosts. Disturbing, but predictable. Pathogens evolved. This one just did it with horrifying speed. Week 4, raiders attacked. Not infected, living humans, desperate or malicious or both. 10 of them, armed, demanding we share our supplies or they'd take them by force. Anders had prepared for this, had defensive positions established, had trained everyone. We held them off without firing a shot, just displayed enough competence and firepower that they decided easier targets existed elsewhere. But it was a reminder that Henrik had been right. Other people were the real danger. The infected were predictable, manageable. Humans were not. Week 6. Ingrid led a scavenging expedition to a town 30 miles south. I went with her, eager to prove useful beyond the laboratory. We found the town partially burned, partially frozen, completely dead. Infected wandered the streets in small numbers, easy to avoid. We salvaged food, medicine, fuel, batteries, anything useful that hadn't been destroyed or looted. In a pharmacy, while loading antibiotics and painkillers, I found a photograph on the floor. A family, parents, and 3 children smiling on a beach somewhere warm and distant. I picked it up, looked at their faces, wondered if they'd survived. Probably not. The statistics were against it. 90% of the population gone in the first month, another 5% in the next 3 months. We were the remnant, the fraction that had been lucky or prepared or ruthless enough to continue. Week 8. Spring arrived fully. The tundra transformed from white to brown to patches of green as hardy plants pushed through melting snow. Rivers ran with meltwater. Animals appeared. Birds returning from migration. Mammals emerging from hibernation. Life reasserting itself with stubborn determination. The infected increased proportionally. Groups of them wandered across the landscape, drawn by unknown stimuli, following paths that might have been memory or randomness. We saw hundreds over those weeks, avoided most, neutralized those that got too close to the facility. Anders taught me to kill them efficiently, destroy the brain, sever the spine, anything that stopped motor function. They didn't feel pain, didn't fear death, so mercy was irrelevant. Week 10. I proposed an idea to the settlement council. Yes, we had a council. Democratic decision-making, civilization rebuilding itself from scratch. My proposal: we should document everything, our survival strategies, our failures, our successes, our knowledge of the infection. Write it down, preserve it, because if we died, if New Bergen fell, someone else might find it and benefit. The council approved. I started writing, creating a comprehensive survival manual that covered everything from water purification to infected behavior patterns to psychological strategies for maintaining sanity in isolation. Others contributed their expertise. Sophie documented engine repair. Kari wrote medical procedures. Anders detailed defensive tactics. We created something valuable, something that might outlast us. Week 12. Received a radio transmission on a frequency we'd been monitoring but never heard traffic on before. Military frequency, encrypted, but the encryption was broken or abandoned because the message came through, clear. Attention survivors. Norwegian Defense Force, maintaining operations from Svalbard. Evacuation ongoing for verified immune individuals. If you possess immunity documentation or have survived confirmed exposure, make for long-year buy-in. Screening and transport available. This message repeats. Immunity. The word hung in the air like a promise and a lie. We'd seen people survive bites, watched the infection fail to take hold in rare individuals. Kari estimated maybe 1 in 1,000 had natural immunity. But we had no way to test, no documentation, no proof. The council debated for days. Should we make for Svalbard? Risk the journey, the exposure, the possibility that military remnants were just another desperate group luring victims? Or stay in New Bergen, maintain what we'd built, survive? On our terms? We put it to a vote. 7 voted to stay, 6 to attempt Svalbard. Close, but the settlement held together. Those who wanted to leave would leave. Those who wanted to stay would stay. We'd remain allied, help each other, but not force unity. Ingrid voted to stay. "I'm done running," she said. "Done chasing rescue. This is real. This works. I'm building here." I voted to stay too. Svalbard was 800 miles north, across terrain and ocean, through infected, and who knew what else. The odds of making it seemed impossibly low. Better to build here, survive here, and hope that military remnants eventually came south looking for survivors. Week 14. The 6 who chose Svalbard departed. We gave them supplies, weapons, the best equipment we could spare. Sent them off with hope and dread in equal measure. They headed north on snowmobiles, pulling sleds loaded with survival gear, and we never heard from them again. I hoped they made it. Feared they hadn't. Week 16. I had a conversation with Sophie late one night, both of us on guard duty, watching the perimeter from the facility's observation tower. We talked about the world before, what we'd lost, what we missed. "Coffee," she said. Real coffee from a cafe, sitting by a window in Oslo, watching people walk by. I'd trade a year of my life for 1 more hour of that. "Music," I replied. Live music, orchestra, concert hall, feeling the sound in my chest. I didn't appreciate it enough when it was everywhere. Do you think we'll ever have that again? Real civilization, culture, luxury? I thought about it, watching darkness and listening to wind. Maybe, generations from now, if we survive, if we rebuild, if we remember what we were. But us? Probably not. We're the transition generation. We survive so others can live. Sophie nodded. That's depressing. That's honest. Week 18. We found a child. Anders discovered her during a patrol, hiding in an abandoned vehicle 5 miles from the facility. 7 years old, malnourished, hypothermic, traumatized into silence. She hadn't spoken since Anders brought her back, just stared with huge eyes and flinched at sudden movements. Kari worked with her, gentle and patient, treating physical ailments while others tried to reach her psychologically. Slowly, over days, she started responding, started eating, started existing instead of just surviving. Her name was Elise. Her family had fled south from Tromsø, got caught in a storm, crashed their vehicle. Parents died from infected attacks, her older brother from cold. She'd hidden in the vehicle for weeks, eating scraps, drinking melted snow, waiting for rescue that hadn't come. She became everyone's project. We all wanted to help, to save this one child, to prove that innocence could survive apocalypse. Sophie made her toys from scrap metal. Anders carved wooden animals. I taught her about stars, about science, about the world that had existed before infection. Slowly, painfully, she began to heal. Week 20. Summer arrived, brief and intense. Temperatures rose above freezing regularly. The tundra bloomed with wildflowers in impossible colors, purple, yellow, red splashes against brown and green. Insects emerged in swarms, mosquitoes and midges that made outdoor work miserable but also meant food for birds and fish. We planted a garden. Not much. The growing season was too short, the soil too poor. But we tried. Potatoes, hardy greens, anything that might supplement our diet. It was optimistic. It was human. Week 22. Infected activity increased dramatically with the warmth. They moved faster, stronger, less impaired by environmental factors. We started seeing larger groups, 50, 100, wandering in loose formations. They didn't attack the facility directly, but they were present, constant, a reminder that we existed in their world now, not the other way around. Anders increased patrols, doubled guards, established kill zones and fallback positions. We were preparing for siege, for the possibility that someday a horde would come that we couldn't avoid or repel. Week 24. I made a breakthrough in my research. Studying infected tissue under the microscope, I noticed something. The infection concentrated in neural tissue, particularly the brainstem and spinal cord. But it left other organs largely intact. The infected weren't rotting, they were preserved, maintained by the infection in a state of animated suspension. That explained why they didn't starve, didn't die from exposure as quickly as living humans would. The infection kept them functioning, drawing energy from consumed tissue, but also from environmental sources we didn't understand yet. They were biological machines, optimized for one purpose: spread the infection. Understanding didn't help us kill them better, didn't make survival easier. But it satisfied something in me. The scientist who needed to comprehend even in the face of horror. Week 26, celebration. We marked 6 months since establishing New Bergen, 6 months of successful communal survival. Sophie brewed alcohol from fermented grains, terrible alcohol, but alcohol nonetheless. We shared a meal, told stories, allowed ourselves to be human instead of just survivors. Elise laughed for the first time that night. Genuine laughter from a child who'd forgotten how. That sound was worth everything, justified every hardship and sacrifice. Week 28. Raiders came back, different group this time, larger, 30 individuals, better organized, better armed. They didn't demand tribute. They attacked directly, trying to overwhelm our defenses through numbers. We fought them off, but it cost us. 2 dead, Kari and a young man named Jakob, and 4 wounded. The raiders lost more, but they retreated intact, and we knew they'd be back. Anders called a council meeting. "We can't stay here," he said flatly. "Word is spreading. People know about this place, know we have supplies. We're a target. We need to either significantly upgrade defenses or abandon the facility." Debate raged for hours. Some wanted to stay and fortify, build walls and barriers, turn New Bergen into a fortress. Others wanted to scatter, return to isolated survival, avoid the attention that came with civilization. I proposed a middle path. Decentralize. Establish multiple small outposts instead of one large settlement, linked by radio and cooperation, but not presenting a single target. Spread risk, spread resources, spread survival. The council approved my plan. Over the next weeks, we split into 3 groups. One stayed at the mining facility, downsizing, but maintaining it as a central hub. Another moved to a coastal location Ingrid had scouted, establishing a fishing-based settlement. The third, including me, moved inland to a location I'd identified. A series of caves in the mountains, defensible and hidden. Week 30. I helped establish our new settlement. 5 people, enough to maintain a presence, but not enough to attract attention. We called it simply the Caves, because naming things felt presumptuous when survival was uncertain. Living in caves was primal, a return to humanity's earliest shelters. But these caves were dry, deep, defensible. We established fires near the entrance for warmth and light, built structures from salvaged materials for privacy and storage, and created a community that felt more like family than settlement. Week 34. Winter returned, the cycle continuing. Temperatures dropped, snow fell, and the infected slowed again. We'd survived a full year since the outbreak, beating odds that had seemed impossible. I thought often about the research station, wondered if it was still standing, still orange and isolated on the tundra. Wondered if other survivors had found it, used it, made it their sanctuary, as it had been mine. Week 36. Received a transmission from the mining facility. Ingrid's voice, urgent. New Bergen is under siege. Multiple infected groups, coordinated attack. We're holding but need assistance. We mobilized immediately, all 5 of us, grabbing weapons and supplies. The journey to the facility took 8 hours through snow and darkness, moving as fast as we dared. Arrived to chaos. The facility was surrounded by infected, hundreds of them, pressing against defenses, probing barriers, searching for weakness. The defenders were holding barely, firing from elevated positions, using improvised explosives, doing everything possible to keep the horde at bay. We hit them from behind, a surprise attack that broke their formation. Not out of intelligence, infected didn't have tactics in the conventional sense, but by drawing their attention, splitting their focus, half turned to face us, reducing pressure on the facility's defenders. The fight lasted hours. Close combat, desperate and brutal, where hesitation meant death. I killed 17 infected that night. Counted each one, remembered each face, carried each death as a weight that didn't diminish, even though they'd already been dead. We won. The horde broke, wandered away, the mysterious force that had coordinated them, apparently exhausted or satisfied. New Bergen stood, damaged but intact. We'd lost 3 more people, but the settlement survived. Week 38, recovery. Treating wounds, repairing defenses, processing trauma. We'd been tested and passed, but the cost was devastating. Of the original 13 survivors who'd established New Bergen, 6 remained. The caves group was intact, as was the coastal settlement, but our numbers overall were diminishing. Mathematics was cruel. Every attack, every encounter, every season reduced our population. At this rate, none of us would see a 5th year. Survival required not just enduring but growing, replenishing losses, expanding beyond subsistence. Week 40. Ingrid proposed something radical during a radio conference between all 3 settlements. We should actively seek other survivors. Not wait for them to find us, not just defend what we had, but expand, recruit, build. We're thinking too small, she argued. 3 settlements, 20 people total. That's not survival, that's slow extinction. We need hundreds, thousands, need to rebuild population, rebuild society, need to be proactive. Anders disagreed. Every new person is a risk, could be infected, could be hostile, could bring raiders to our locations. We're safe because we're hidden. We're dying because we're isolated, Ingrid countered. Safety through obscurity only works if we're willing to disappear completely. I'm not ready for that. The debate continued. I stayed silent, seeing merit in both positions. Expansion meant risk, but also hope. Isolation meant safety, but also stagnation. Eventually we compromised. Each settlement would send scouts carefully to known population centers. Look for survivors, assess them, offer alliance to those who seem compatible. Grow slowly, carefully, maintaining security while building community. I volunteered to scout, needed to move, to act, to do something besides huddle in caves waiting for the next crisis. Week 42. Departed on a scouting mission with Anders, heading southwest toward what had been a city of 60,000. The journey took 5 days, moving carefully through terrain that was actively hostile. Infected were everywhere, wandering in the post-winter thaw, emerging from wherever they'd sheltered during the deep freeze. We reached the city and found hell. Buildings burned or collapsed, streets clogged with debris and bodies. Infected owned this place, moving through it like they belonged, which I suppose they did now. This was their territory, their habitat. Humans were just prey that occasionally wandered through. We found survivors anyway. Not in the city proper, that would have been suicidal, but in the outskirts where a group of 7 had fortified a warehouse. They'd survived through discipline and ruthlessness, killing anyone who got infected immediately, maintaining strict quarantine protocols, accepting losses as inevitable cost. Their leader, a woman named Petra, was interested in alliance but skeptical. "What do you offer that we don't already have?" "Community," I replied. "Knowledge sharing. Multiple locations means if one falls, others survive. Safety in distribution. Or 3 times the chance of being betrayed. That's the risk. But isolation is certain death. Eventually your supplies run out, your people get old or injured, and you're too few to continue. With us, you have options." She agreed to think about it, to send a representative to New Bergen to evaluate our settlements. Small progress, but progress nonetheless. Week 44. Returned to the caves to find it abandoned, not attacked, just empty, with a note from our people. Moved to mining facility, caves flooded during thaw, regrouping. So we walked to New Bergen, another 2 days of travel, and found our group integrated with the main settlement. 19 people now, the largest population we'd sustained. The facility was different, improved. Someone had started painting murals on the walls, scenes from before, memories of cities and forests and oceans, art surviving apocalypse, beauty persisting against everything that said it shouldn't. Week 46. Petra's representative arrived, a young man named Lucas, and spent a week observing our settlement. He participated in work, ate with us, attended council meetings, and asked questions constantly. At week's end, he delivered his assessment. "You're real. You're functioning. You've got problems, who doesn't, but you're building something sustainable. Petra will want to join, all 7 of us." 26 people. We were growing. Week 48. The coastal settlement reported something extraordinary. A ship, not abandoned, not drifting, a working vessel with crew, sailing along the coast, stopping at settlements, offering trade and information. They called themselves the North Sea Collective, survivors from Denmark and Scotland who'd found each other, pooled resources, and established a maritime network. They offered goods we desperately needed: medicines, solar panels, books, coffee, in exchange for fuel, information, and labor. New Bergen sent representatives to meet them. I went, curious and cautious. The ship was impressive. A fishing trawler converted to multifunctional survival vessel, armed and armored but not military. The captain, a Scottish woman named Margaret, outlined their vision. The sea is safer than land. Infected can't swim, can't cross water. Islands are naturally defensible. We're building a network of coastal and island settlements connected by ship, trading, and supporting each other. Join us. It was tempting. Leave the land entirely, take to the sea, escape the constant threat of infected and raiders. But it also meant abandoning everything we'd built, starting over again. And I was tired of starting over. We negotiated. New Bergen would ally with the collective, but remain land-based, serving as a waypoint and trading post. They'd provide us with goods and information. We'd provide them with fuel and inland intelligence. Partnership without surrender. Week 50. 1 year since Pavel died. I marked it privately, standing outside the facility in falling snow, remembering the friend who'd saved my life by bringing me north, who died because isolation and fear had broken him. "We're doing better now," I said to his memory. "Building something that lasts. You'd be proud, or you'd say we're being stupid, exposing ourselves. But we're trying, Pavel. We're trying to be human again." Week 52. Full year complete. From outbreak to now, I'd survived 12 months of apocalypse. Lost count of how many infected I'd seen, how many people I'd watched die, how many close calls should have killed me. But I was alive. We were alive. 26 people in New Bergen, 7 in Petra's group planning to join, maybe 50 scattered in coastal settlements linked to the collective. Perhaps 100 total in our network. Against billions dead, it was nothing. Against zero, it was everything. I continued my research, my documentation, my efforts to understand the infection and our survival. Wrote it all down in meticulous detail because knowledge was the one thing we couldn't afford to lose. The infection wasn't going away. It had changed the world permanently, turned Earth into a planet where humans were no longer apex predators, but prey. Survivors hanging on through ingenuity and desperation. But we were hanging on. Building communities, establishing networks, recreating civilization from fragments and hope. It was slow, fragile, uncertain, but it was real. And sometimes, late at night, watching stars from the facility observation tower, I allowed myself to hope that somewhere, someone else was doing the same. That across the world, pockets of survivors were building, connecting, refusing to surrender. That humanity's story wasn't over, just different now. Harder, darker, more honest about our fragility. But continuing nonetheless, because that's what survivors do. We continue.